Hey everybody, welcome to Secure the Seat Live. We're so happy that you're here with us. You could be anywhere on the internet and you're here with us, so we don't take that lightly. My name is Minda Hartz and I am your host. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. You're in for a treat. And if you rock with us every Monday at noon, welcome back. You know you are already part of the squad. You don't even need a membership to get to you in the mail. You're already part of it. We're happy that you're joining us today. I'm excited about today's topic because we're going to talk about returning back to the office. I know that many of you probably feel many kind of ways about returning back to the office. And I look at it from kind of two perspectives. There is the part of the company to prepare for that transition, but then there's also our individual selves. What are we doing to prepare for going back to the office, whatever that might mean at your company or organization? Before we get started, I know oftentimes we're like, oh, Monday, but we get to create whatever Monday vibes we want, and we're going to kick them off really good. So let's not leave anything on the table this week. Let's go after every single thing that is ours, right? What's for us. Remember last week we had Candia on and she was talking about our belief systems. So make sure that you put those belief systems to the side if they're not serving you. So again, welcome to Secure the Seat. If you have any questions or comments throughout today's episode, make sure that you put them in. I know many of you are watching on LinkedIn, others on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you might be. Let us know how your weekend was. Also, too, I've been talking about this every week for the last couple weeks, but I have openings for the Secure the Seat Writers Retreat. This is my second year offering the Writers Retreat. So many of you tell me that you want to write a book. You always have questions. I have people emailing me daily, several times a day, asking questions. And so I want to make sure that you have the resources you need. We're going to drop that link to the course. It starts next month. So join us. We even have flexible payment options for those who may not be in a position to pay it all at once, but I still want you to be there because it's important for all of us to continue to secure our seat. And for our guests, for our crew here, for our squad, if you use STS 2021, you get a discount on that. Okay, so we're getting that out of the way. Today's topic is returning back to work. I'm so excited to have today's special guest, Dr. Jacinta Jimenez. She is a VP at Better Up Coaching. She's also an author. And so I'm going to welcome Dr. Jacinta to the stage now. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon. I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy that you're here. And it's such a great topic for our viewers that may not be familiar with your work. Please tell us a little more about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a board certified coach, but most importantly, I'm really proud and honored to be Vice President of Coach Innovation at Better Up. And what we do is we drive personal and professional growth at an individual level through coaching at scale, and then also our technology. And that actually drives really amazing business outcomes. So we partner with really big companies and get to provide them with coaching. And it's really cool. It's great coaching. It's evidence-based, but allowing people to get that individual kind of level of care. So you could really, change is hard, but having a coach and also, a really cool mobile app to support you along the way makes a huge difference. So I love what I do.
Awesome. I had the opportunity to do an event with some of your colleagues at Better Up back in February, and I had a really great time. So I'm so excited for people to learn more about what you do there and more about Better Up. And we'll drop Better Up's link in the chat so that people can find out more about what you all do, the great work that you do there. But let's talk about it, Dr. Jacinta. I mean, so many people are concerned about going back into the workplace. Stats say that over 50% of employees do not want to return back to the office full time. Why do you think so many people don't feel comfortable transitioning back to the office?
Yeah, it's surprising in some ways to see the big stat. On the other hand, I'm like, well, it makes sense when I think about it through my lens as a psychologist. I mean, we have been dealing with wild amounts of uncertainty. And through all of 2020 and even returning to the office is still so uncertain. We have questions like, can I maintain my work-life balance? Will I lose control over my time? I've been enjoying time with my children. How am I going to transition that? Will conditions be safe? What will the environment look and feel like? Will I feel supported in that? And as humans, we're just wired to hate uncertainty. It's not good for us. It's not evolutionarily viable for us. And so, if we didn't know, if we're, hunters and gatherers and we were walking around outside and we didn't know what the weather conditions were, we didn't know what predators were in the area, that puts us at risk. And so we're just wired not to like it. There's so much. So I'll just throw out the study real quick that I love to share, is that it's from the Imperial College of London. And they asked people, would you rather have a shock now, or you could have a shock or not later on in the day? And most people pick the shock now because they just don't want to have to deal with the uncertainty. And the people who picked the one that said, oh, I may have a shock later on, actually had higher nervous system activation. So people are feeling uncertain and anxious. And I think it's up to employers to really think about, how do we make people feel more secure, and how do we make people also feel, people are tired too. So how do we make sure we're taking care of people psychologically?
Yes. Thank you for sharing that study. And that is true. I mean, for all those watching, how do you feel about returning back to the office? Put it in the chat. We'd love to hear how you're feeling. And you mentioned something really important. The companies, what are companies and organizations doing? I have so many people that are emailing me and saying, they're telling us we're coming back in September. Next week, we're having our first in-person meeting. And even though a lot of people knew that at some point we'd go back into the office, more than likely for many of us, it still is a shock to the system, right? Because people weren't ready. What, in your opinion, can companies and orgs do to help employees ease back into the office environment?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think if you're a company that thinks everything's just going to go back to normal as is, I'd say that's a pretty risky hope. So, first, I think recognizing that people have gone through something really significant. We weren't just working from home. We're working from home during a global pandemic. And there was a lot of other things that were happening in 2020 that have affected many people. And it's so important to realize, we're tired. We're psychologically taxed. And then I think, I write about this in my book, The Burnout Fix, because burnout was already a really big problem, a rising problem before a COVID hit. So much so that in 2019, so not too far before COVID hit, the World Health Organization recognized burnout in its ICD, or the International Classification of Diseases, as an occupational phenomenon because it had grown so much. And so I talk about these ABCs that I think help create what I call steady pulse culture, meaning steady, like creating that certainty. And the first one is agency. And that's all about fostering autonomy, giving people, when we have autonomy, we feel more secure. And so communicating really clear and implicit and explicit expectations for job role success, ensuring that workload, resources, and time constraints are realistic and feasible as people go through this transition, and investing in meaningful personal and professional development. The B is benevolence, just do no harm. This is all about committing to equitable practices. I mean, underrepresented populations, frontline workers have been going through double the stress. So committing to that, acting with integrity, confirming, recognizing and awarding accomplishments. And then the last one is community. We need each other. We've been separated. So the C is community, fostering inclusion and belonging, conditions for psychological safety where people can speak up. So fear goes down and courage rises, and just caring for people, caring for your employees as people. So if we can lean in, if organizations can lean into these three pillars, again, it's the ABCs. So hopefully it's easier to remember. I think it can make a huge difference in guarding against, these are tied to guarding against burnout, but also just creating more certainty for folks and leaning into the human side of things. We are humans. We're not machines. We can't just ramp back up. We have feelings and emotions, and they're important, and they will do better at work if organizations lead into the human side of work.
Yes, I love those ABCs. And if you're feeling some burnout, somebody who might be, we're dropping Dr. Jacinta's new book, The Burnout Fix, so that you can grab it, because as you said, we're all feeling it in some way, shape, or form, and we're tired. And oftentimes I say to myself, "Ooh, thank God I don't have any, X, Y, and Z in the house, because I'd be extra tired." I feel for my friends who have kids and this and that, and a beautiful thing, right? But it's a lot of work, and I think that a lot of companies also have to realize that working from home didn't mean the same thing for everybody, right? And so returning might not mean the same thing either, right?
100%. I couldn't agree with that more. Like, while all employees have experienced this like global pandemic that the world, pretty much shut down, people haven't experienced it in the same way. And so it's not a one size fits all approach. It can't be. We have to really be thinking about how we equip leaders to work with their direct reports to really support them in the way they need it most. So I couldn't agree more with what you just said.
Yeah. Yes. And I love that you said, companies, they should be taking the fear down and allowing people to bring more of that courage and have the conversation. We have a great question here from Michelle that I want to pose to you, Dr. Jacinta, is, if you don't mind, do you have any advice for people who are working with completely different team members and leaders than before the pandemic? So that's a great question. And also, too, I'm sure there's a lot of people who were hired during the pandemic and haven't even met their colleagues in person yet.
So many people are going back to work and they have totally different teams. They haven't met anyone before. And this is, again, what my biggest advice would be for leaders to lean into building psychological safety. So psychological safety isn't about everyone getting along and feeling like safe because everyone's agreeing with one another. It's about creating a safe environment where people can take interpersonal risks of candor. And when psychological safety goes up, fear goes down, and courage goes up, and people can say, hey, I'm not feeling connected, or hey, this isn't working. And that's one of the biggest predictors of team performance. And it takes a little bit of time to build up psychological safety. It's about working together to set team norms about how do we want to show up as a team? How do we want to communicate? All of these things that set a really solid foundation versus just like throwing people back in. You haven't even met someone, you don't even know how they work, and just trying to hit goals. Taking the time to set the stage and foster that psychological safety, I cannot emphasize that enough. I think it's huge. And the research shows it too. So it's not just me saying it, but I've seen it work too in my coaching.
I love that. For some people who may not be familiar with the term psychological safety, can you expound just a little bit on that, Dr. Jacinta?
Yeah, I liken it to like a psychological trust fall. Like, I don't know if I've never done a trust fall, but if anyone's gone to like camp or like, I think they have it in an episode of The Office where a group of your colleagues stand there, try to hold you, and you stand up on a desk and you fall back, right? And they catch you. It's kind of like that, but in a psychological sense. So you're taking a psychological risk or an emotional risk of voicing something that is a respectful dissent or speaking up, and knowing that you're going to be caught psychologically, that you're going to be heard and you're going to be seen. And that's huge. That goes such a long way in missing, if people don't raise their hand and go say something, mistakes can happen. Inequitable practices, so many different things can go wrong if we're not able to be candid. So it's like a psychological trust fall. The technical thing is interpersonal risks, like psychological interpersonal risks taking.
Yes. And it's hard to speak your truth or say, actually, I'm not ready to come back. Could we talk about 3 days a week, 4 days a week, until the end of the year? So feeling comfortable, right? So leaders, managers, you should be creating that space so that even if you can't say yes to that, people at least feel comfortable to come and bring it to your attention. And I think that's where a lot of organizations and companies, we don't feel comfortable to even have these conversations. So create that space.
Yep, that's you said it perfectly. Yeah, speaking your truth, feeling like you can speak your truth. Yeah,
absolutely. I know the chat is. People are talking, giving their feedback too on what their offices are doing. Keep that commentary coming. And if you have any questions, please make sure that we have the expert here today. So make sure that you drop the questions in. You talked a little bit about Better Up, but you're part of the leadership team there. How, I'm a big proponent of people leveraging coaching inside the workplace. How can coaching help managers as they return back to the workplace? Because we also need our leaders to be equipped to return and be the best managers that they can be, right?
Yeah. And leaders and managers are people too, right? So, and they're tired too, and they've been psychologically taxed over time. I feel like it's like these corrosive drips of stress that en masse can really take a toll on someone. And I think for leaders, it's really about making sure you are investing in resilience practices, that rest and knowing that rest and recovery aren't at odds with doing serious work in a serious time. If anything, the two go hand in hand. When we invest in ourselves, when we take care of ourselves, when we get support, so to be, resilient and psychologically sound, we do better work. We're more empathic. We're more tolerant. We are able to actually set the stage for psychological safety and listen to our people. So it's people think it's soft, these soft skills, the resilience practices that I talk about in my book, but they're really everything in a lot of ways. It sets the stage for your people to shine. And so I would encourage leaders to really figure out, working with their coach, how to invest in that, especially so they can show up and hold that space for their team. It takes work, but people are tired, and we need to be able to really lean into. I always say, like, a lot of times we've been talking about hard work and smart work, like productivity hacks, but I think the missing piece is these resilience practices. Because a new world of work necessitates new ways to approach work. And we need to approach it with understanding that resilience and self-care and burnout prevention and psychological well-being are not nice to have. They are necessary tools to be a great leader, especially coming out of COVID.
Yes. all of that. And I think that, I heard, I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard a gentleman say that actually he's in leadership at a certain company. And he said, actually, I'm looking at my leadership team and saying, are these the right leaders going into this new era of work, right? Because some of the competencies that we need, it's clear that some of our managers aren't able to execute on these, right? Or maybe they need additional training so that they can allow their staff to do the best work and they do the best work of their careers. And I think that's like part of this psychological safety. We're like, well, that's a manager, but should that person still be the manager as we return back to work? So those are the hard conversations. But if we're really about equity, then we need to make sure that everybody is in the position that makes the company grow and thrive.
Yeah. And best supports people, sets people up for success, and does that deeper work of looking inward and taking care of oneself. It's not just about hitting goals. It's about nurturing your people.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. Dr. Jacinta, before we move on to our bonus questions, talk to us about why you wrote your new book. I want people to learn more about that, because I know a lot of us are feeling that burnout. And it's okay to feel that, right? I think sometimes we've been conditioned to not even admit that we feel that, right? Exactly.
Oh yeah, and we're human. I mean, humans are so resilient, but we also feel, and the more we can, talk about it, the more it can get destigmatized. Thanks for asking this question. Yeah, when I wrote this book, I had no idea there was going to be a global pandemic that would affect our day-to-day lives profoundly. But what I did know was that there was a growing trend of burnout. Like it's pretty significant, and that people were wanting more from work. People were like, 1 out of 2 employees from a recent Deloitte survey found that people want their managers to focus more on well-being and the people side of work. And I got concerned also just seeing technology. I live and breathe and work in Silicon Valley, and just seeing how work is just changing at this unprecedented pace, right? It's just fast. Things are just changing. We're entering this wild new world of work, but we're hanging on to outdated formulas of what it takes to be and sustain our success at work. And so I felt like it's pressing need to write the book, because as we innovate, as we work to create new tech, as we address things like climate change and social and racial justice, that people aren't losing their vitality along the way, that people have the space to actually address these things in the best way possible, so that we're creating like ethical tech, that we're doing this with really deep intention, that we have productive conversations where people can dissent from each other with psychological safety. And so just wanting to write a message that shows you can sustain your success, you can lean into these things and do amazing work. Yes, like I said earlier, serious work in a serious time does not come at odds with rest, replenishment, recovery, all of these things. And we will show up better and do better work when we are centered and peaceful in ourselves. We project that to everything we do. We show up to our communities, our families, our employees better and more empathic, and that spreads. So that was the impetus.
Well, we love it. I'm glad that you wrote it. We're going to drop the link. Make sure that you get that book, pass it around, because that burnout, it's not going to go away if we don't do anything about it, typically.
Yeah, and burnout isn't just from overwork. Yeah. There's other mismatches. So like if we don't feel social support in our job, or we don't feel like there's fairness or there's not inclusion, those take away. Christina Maslach, who's one of the biggest researchers in burnout, calls it an erosion of dignity, spirit, and will, an erosion of the human soul. That's what burnout is. It's pretty heavy, but it gets it. It's like taking away that human piece of us.
Wow. Yeah. That erosion, that is such a great word for it, because that's how you kind of feel, like your erosion of like energy, right? Like the other day I was so burnt out that I had like this long to-do list, but all I could do was lay down. That rest and recovery.
Yeah, you're laying down. Yeah.
So listen to your body, listen to those things. I love it. Want to go into our bonus questions, and I think we'll have time for one last question at the end. So make sure that you get your questions in the chat. I am a lover of grits and rap lyrics, and Dr. Jacinta, do you eat grits? Is that something that you enjoy?
I literally had grits Sunday for brunch. Yeah.
I love it. How do you like your grits?
I like them with bacon, all kinds of things mixed in. So yeah.
But not sugar. Is sugar one of them?
Not sugar. I don't take the syrup. Now tomato syrup.
All right. Well, okay. I knew we had something in common, and I was hoping that wouldn't drive the erosion in our.
Like literally this Sunday. No joke.
I love that. And then I also I feel like a good bowl of grits goes good with music. What is your favorite rap lyric and why?
This is a hard one for me. So I picked I don't know if it's my favorite rap lyric, but it's a rap lyric that's been on my mind. I've been interested in, I just recently discovered NF, and I like him because he has, he talks about therapy very openly, and he has a song called Therapy Session, but he has this one from his track, Remember This, and it's surround yourself with people that challenge how you think, not people that nod their head and act like they agree. And I think that's so, again, it's that psychological safety piece.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. That's a great lyric going into the week.
Yeah.
Question that I wanted to ask you is that, in my opinion, I believe we all have the capacity to lead. We don't have to wait for a promotion to activate our leadership. What is one tip or piece of advice you would give to all of our leaders watching on how to make the workplace better than we found it?
Yeah, gosh. I would say just don't shy away from addressing the psychological implications of this pandemic and what it's done for people. People are struggling. Depression is going up. People are, what at Better, and it's from researcher Corey Keyes calls languishing, where we're not like depressed necessarily yet, but we're also not flourishing. We're in this like weird in between. We're like, ugh. And if that's a human place to visit, it's fine. But if it's left unchecked and we're not helping our people flourish, that will lead to burnout and depression and all kinds of things. And so don't shy away from addressing the psychological implications of this.
That's so good. You gave us a lot of tambourine moments today, and I appreciate that, because our mental health, our wellness, It's not just at home, right? It's in the office. It's in every space that we inhabit. So thank you. And I hope you all are listening to this and taking it in. We're going to drop the Burnout Fix in the link. So Mike can drop that in, so you can all make sure that you get that in your cart and add that as another resource and a tool as you start to return back. And even if you aren't returning back into the office, you still have to be aware of how burnout is shaping up in there. One last question before we go. I'm looking here, and there's one great question here from Yolanda. What if Black employees didn't feel psychologically safe and now feel safer remote? How should they proceed? That's a great question.
I've actually been hearing this, but
Yeah.
it makes sense. It makes sense. It's like, oh, I don't have to, I mean, if there is not inclusion or belonging, right? And that's one of the lack of social support can literally, it's like a person job mismatch can lead to burnout. And so and if you're not feeling psychologically safe to bring that up to your manager, that's tricky. And this is where I'm like, well, this is why we have HR, but also finding other folks to talk through about, like, I have this women, because I'm a first generation Latina, has been through trying to navigate academia, business, and technology. And I've found this circle of women that I lean into a lot to talk through how to best approach it. Because I don't think there is an easy answer. I wish I could say just do this, but it's challenging. And I've been hearing from a lot of women of color, especially, like, yeah, home's good. Home's good. It feels safer. And that's powerful. That's powerful. It says something about the culture, but it also says, it's something like really important to figure out how to navigate that as well. It's legit. It's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been hearing so much about that too. And I think this is where, Dr. Jacinta said it, where we lessen the fear and enter into the courage, because oftentimes if you're working in a dominant majority workspace, they aren't aware of how their Black and brown employees are experiencing the workplace. And so if there is a way for you to bring this up to someone you trust, where they can even do a survey where they're reaching out to their Black and brown employees and asking them, right? So it's not just you putting yourself out there necessarily, but you're bringing up this. And this is also a good reason for you to bring it up to see what they do. Do they want to create that psychological safety inside the workplace or not, right?
Totally. And then seeing if there is an advocate or someone of privilege who's willing to, that you trust, that could not bring this up for you, so it's not as unsafe, or figuring out, how to get it voiced, to see how they react. So, yeah.
Yes, because if they act like they don't care or whatever the case, then that's all the intel that you need to either say, this is a place I need to strategize out of here, or another department or something. But you deserve to have that conversation, at least to find out what they're willing or not willing to do to create that space for you. But we're rooting for all of you. We want you to return back to a safe environment and not dread going back for various reasons, right? So, Dr. Jimenez, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with as they go into the rest of the work week?
I would just, something I say to people is, like, just hold on to this mantra that I use, is like, when you stress, you must rest. So it's okay to have stress, but just counterbalance it with rest. And it can be micro rests, like just little micro things, like 5 minutes. So after this, I'm excited to be here, but I know, like, okay, my nervous system's activated. So afterwards I'll rest for 5 minutes and then I'll go back. And it's that counterbalance, we call it oscillation and peak performance, that can really keep you a lot more balanced. So it's these micro doses of rest. I would encourage you to think about how you can incorporate those throughout your day. So when you stress, you must rest.
That's the mantra for the rest of our life. I'm like, yes, I'm going to be going back and watching the replay here. And listen, share this with someone. Also, share this episode with your leadership. Share it with your manager, because this way also be a way for you to say, hey, I know that you're human, as Dr. Jimenez said. You obviously wouldn't say, oh, I know you're a human being, that, but you would go back and say, hey, I know that we're all transitioning back, right? Not just me, but I came across a really great episode. I'd love for you to listen, and it might trigger something in a good way for them to think about what it means as we start to return back.
I love that.
Well, one last thing, make sure that you go ahead and cop the book, The Burnout Fix. We'll drop it in the link, in the chat there. I know that so many of you have enjoyed today's conversation, because this is part of some of our stress, right? Whether you're going back or you're figuring out what it looks like to stay remote or to have those conversations. So thank you so much, Dr. Jacinta, for giving us the gems, making us feel better about these conversations and going forward. Thank you for your work that you do, not just at Better Up, but in communities and companies that many of us benefit from. So thank you so much. And listen, all of you who've joined us today and who will join us throughout the week and watch the replay, make sure that you share it. Make sure you get that micro dose of rest, okay, that we talked about today. And if you're able, join us for the Secure the Seat Writers Retreat. We'd love to have you there. Get that book out. That may be part of lessening your stress, all right? So it's been great. Thank you again, Dr. Jacinta, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.